On Metacritic, Blueprints is the highest rated game of 2025, with a rating of 93. On OpenCritic, it's a similar story. Blueprints has a 90, putting it in second place, just behind Split Fiction, also on a 90. Many reviewers, myself included, are already touting it as the game to beat for Game of the Year. Yet if you look at the user reviews on Metacritic, it's currently sitting on a 6.5. On Steam, it's not much better, with only 77% of users recommending the game. That's almost 1 in 4 who've left a review saying that not only is it not the masterpiece that the critics are saying, but that it's not even worthy of a recommendation, that it's an actively bad game. For critics and players to disagree on a game is nothing new, but I found this case in particular fascinating, not least because I'm obsessed with the game itself. So let's take a look at what might be causing it. The summary of a vast number of the reviews out there, my own included, is sort of, hey, this game is amazing, I'm not really going to tell you why or anything much about it, but trust me, it is, go and play it now. I think that's simplifying them somewhat, as the majority of reviewers did explain the basic mechanics, but what they avoided disclosing was anything and everything that makes this game special, which was the right thing to do. If I try and boil it all down and provide the most simple example of what Blueprints is doing, that still takes away from a reader's experience when they play the game themselves. What it could have caused, arguably, is players who would never like this game not knowing what they're getting themselves into, because they've just got a big number and some relatively vague statements to go on. When you see people say things like, I feel like I'm playing a completely different game to what the critics were, in a way, those players are. Going back to those reviews, I'd be extremely surprised to find one that didn't mention note-taking being almost a necessity, such is the importance of it, but I've seen plenty of people say that they don't even know what they're supposed to be taking notes of. Perhaps it was a bit of a red flag for them, but the effusive praise the game was getting still won them over. Again, I can easily see a player picking up Blueprints based on the reviews, expecting a Game of the Year candidate, but not truly understanding what the game is, trusting that the reviewer knew what they were talking about. In turn, they get quickly frustrated when their expectations are unmet by what the game appears to be offering. It explains why a lot of players might not like it, but not necessarily why critics were so consistently blown away by the game. I've come up with a loose theory, but feel free to disagree, that the qualities that a person needs to be a decent reviewer have a lot of crossover with the qualities you need to enjoy this game. Not to be good at it, but to enjoy it. I suspect that any reviewer worth their salt has at least to some extent an analytical mind, on top of a professional requirement to be patient with the games they're playing. A big part of the job is deconstructing games and digging into their weeds, and this is a game that is begging its players to do exactly that. I want to make it clear that it's not an intelligence thing. I've seen vitriol from both sides, that you have to be a simpleton who'd find rolling a dice over and over again fun to be entertained by Blueprints' mechanics, or that you'd have to be a moron not to see what it's doing below the surface, neither of which are anywhere close to the truth. It's just that, much with any game in any genre, it's not going to be for everyone, and I wonder whether that was made clear enough in its reviews. Some of the difficulty with describing the game comes from that it is truly unique. Uniqueness as a quality is not an inherently good or bad thing in games. My concept for an audio-based puzzle game where you can't move and the only player interaction is flipping between radio stations might be unique, but it doesn't mean that if I made it, it would be any good. What uniqueness does mean is that there isn't necessarily a good frame of reference, and it's difficult to make analogies that accurately hit the mark. That's why I didn't do it in my review. To say it's like a particular game feels most erroneous, but even mentioning particular genres can easily give players the wrong impression. In that regard, the game refers to itself as genre-defying, a statement I wholeheartedly agree with, but which is not exactly helpful for players who are trying to work out if they'll enjoy it or not. The game is also intentionally not honest about what it is. That's a jarring thing to say. It almost sounds like I'm saying it's clickbait, like the thumbnail you clicked on 5 minutes and 16 seconds ago. Or that you've been defrauded into playing something that you didn't sign up for. It's not the first game to do it. Daniel Mullins' Inscription comes to mind as another example of an incredible game that isn't what it may first seem. The difference is, when Inscription flips the script on you, you know it's happened. There's no ambiguity. The moment hits you and anyone else who plays it at the exact same moment in the exact same way. Blueprints is a lot more subtle about it, to the point that players could plausibly take it at face value for the entirety of their playthrough and completely miss it altogether. I see people questioning what in this game could have possibly taken 8 years to create. What I'll say is that the game is not the thing that existed mechanically 7.5 years ago, that's just the vessel through which the real work is delivered. The problem is that it's not clear what this game is on purchase, it's not clear after a few hours of play, and arguably, if you're not looking for it, has the potential to never become clear. I've played Blueprints a lot, but I've still not been able to play it anywhere close to as much as I'd like. I suppose making silly videos talking about it when I'd rather be playing it doesn't help in that regard, but as such, there are still plenty of things I've got left to do. I'm going to bleep any and all spoilers and put a timestamp so you can skip to the end of this segment, because it's going to be long and nonsensical rather than anything else, but it should give you some idea of the amount there is to do in this game. So, off the top of my head, here goes. In my last run, I managed to get and the which I'd been trying to do for a little while, which got me the and that's it. Well, almost certainly not, but that's what I could remember without checking my notes. The point being, by my count, there's about 26 things there that I'm hoping might come up in any given run. If I laser focus on one and only one of those, of course it might take many runs for it to come up. Instead, when I draft my first few rooms in a day and get my first few items, some of those will start to flare up as real possibilities. In the search for those, I'll often discover new things that I want to explore, and solving one of them might end up presenting me with 2 new strands to follow. Some of those things I've been looking for a while, sure, but many are fresh additions from just a run or 2 ago. The only time I can see myself getting frustrated by the randomness is once I've fully solved not only most of that list in its current state, but also the subsequent additions to it, once I'm perhaps left with only 1 or 2 things on my to-do list. That doesn't happen in 5 or 10 or 20 hours. I've got one big mission that I'm currently on. I wouldn't put it past this game for that to lead into yet more mysteries. As mentioned in the previous section, the game presents a very clear goal, and if players take that at face value and only look to do that, I can see how they might get flustered by the drafting mechanic. I'm not sure whether such players have figured out one way to do a particular thing and assume that's how it must be done. I've seen a lot of players commenting that, and more bleeps incoming, they needed to draft the and to get to room 46. You don't need to do that. What does surprise me a bit is that the game isn't really subtle with its first few hooks, the first few hints that there's more to it than the objective with which you're initially presented. It seems like some players aren't investigating those at all, but perhaps they're only noticing the most obvious ones and think that's the extent of the apparent depth that critics are referring to. Small spoilers on the screen for the next 10 seconds, but if you look at this and don't wonder what this is about, or have any idea what you need to do with one of these, or indeed wonder what's going on here, then you're flat out probably not going to enjoy the game. I hate Slay the Spire. Okay, I don't actually, it's an incredible game. What I hate is the influence it's had on indie games since its release. I mentioned in a review once that its creator's Megacrit had a lot to answer for in that regard, but that it was a topic for another time. Well, I guess now's that time. Slay the Spire's influence can be seen in a lot of post-2019 indies. We're still living in the era of the roguelike deck builder. The problem is that they're all almost objectively inferior. Aside from the aforementioned Inscription, and I suppose Balatro if you're so inclined, I feel like they all do what Slay the Spire did, but worse. Varying degrees of worse, sure, some do come quite close, but they're so derivative of Megacrit's title that even if they made some improvements, they can't really be considered contenders for its crown. The dependence on roguelike mechanics, deck building or otherwise, has started to poison the well and make people, rightly, to be fair, skeptical of any mechanics with even a whiff of rogue about them. A lot of the discourse around this game is how it's, at its core, two conflicting genres, a puzzle and a roguelike. What people seem unable to agree on is where on that line it falls. I've seen comments that this is a roguelite through and through, or more often than not, that it's half one and half the other, and if you don't enjoy both, you won't enjoy Blueprints. But here's where I present to you my hottest take. Blueprints is not a roguelike, nor a roguelite if you want to get into such distinctions. The more I play it, the more I'm convinced of that. In the timeline where you hop in a time machine and kill baby Slay the Spire, nobody calls Blueprints a roguelike, which doesn't change it mechanically, obviously, but with it being so unique and everyone now conditioned to be hyper aware of those mechanics, it's easy to look at it and think it is. There's more to it than semantics. I think the less it's treated like one, the more players get out of it. I feel a lot of people disliking the game can be summed up in two categories, both of which are looking at it through that roguelite lens. You've got the people who want it to be a roguelite, who are going into the game expecting it to be one, and who are then disappointed when the aim they've laser focused on, get to the place that is quite obviously marked on the map, is repeatedly stifled by the game. In their eyes, there's about 2 rooms which have anything worth interacting with, and the rest is window dressing that might offer a resource here or there, but nothing more. There is some irony in that even slightly engaging with the other part of the game, the part they're either overlooking or willfully ignoring, and which makes up the bulk of what Blueprints has to offer, would massively assist them in that task, but it's not something they want to do. And that's fine, and the game is likely not for them. Then there's the people who really don't want it to be a roguelike, who ask, why has the creator of this wonderful puzzle game ruined it with all these roguelike mechanics? And the answer is, he hasn't. It's what I said earlier, that it's the vessel through which the real game is delivered, but that vessel isn't even a roguelike, it's a tile placement board game, albeit a digital one. I will concede that once you put it into a video game, not least one in 2025, those concepts start smelling a bit roguelike-like, but it's a simplification of the game and an attempt to make sense of it by applying a video game genre that is similar, that looks the part, but is ultimately not quite accurate. I do wonder how much crossover there is between people who like board games and people who play video games. It feels like it should be quite large, but in actuality, when I think about the people I know within either group, most of them fall far more heavily into one than the other. And perhaps this game is really for people like me, people who fall into both categories. I see the, if you like Outer Wilds, Obra Dinn, Rue Trees, Golden Idol stuff, and can tell why players who've been given those descriptions can come out feeling misled. I see the well-meaning people trying to give advice to players with less than stellar opinions of Blueprints, missing the point that this was never going to be their sort of game to begin with. Give Elden Ring to Hello Kitty Island Adventure players and see what sort of rating they give it. I'm sure there's those out there who enjoy both, but I imagine the rating would go down somewhat. But they're not going to play Elden Ring, they know it's not for them. Without ruining itself for the people who would love it, it's impossible for Blueprints to be clear on what it is to those who won't. I know I said uniqueness is neither a good nor bad thing, but it's what makes people love, or really not love, this game. It's unfortunate for those who go in expecting one thing and really not getting that. So are those negative reviews justified? Probably, yes. I don't think you can begrudge someone buying a game and being upset when they receive a fundamentally different experience to what they were expecting. Whether I, or anyone else, thinks they should have been able to discern that beforehand is irrelevant. They didn't. But are the overwhelmingly positive critic reviews justified? Also, probably yes. We don't all like the same things, and that's okay. I never usually do the whole like, subscribe, comment thing, but in this instance I would be quite interested to know people's thoughts. So if you've made it this far and have something to say, please do. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.